Hello, everyone. My name is Riley Grace Plott, and I am a graduate from Liberty University. This is my second year attending a CBL summit, and it has proven to be just as refining, encouraging, and empowering as the first. I currently work as a social worker and a wedding photographer and planner, and I am married to my high school sweetheart. Last week, my husband and I also just found out that we will be welcoming our first baby in June. Now, it is my honor to introduce to you all today Erika Donalds. Education entrepreneur Erika Donalds is the founder and chairman of OptimaEd and the chair of America First Policy Institute Center for Education Opportunity. A former elected school board member, she is known as a national expert on education policy and school choice and is a frequent commentator and speaker. Prior to launching Optima, Erika spent 20 years in the financial services industry, finishing her career as chief financial officer and managing partner of a multi-billion-dollar investment management firm. Erika and her husband, Congressman Byron Donalds, live in Naples, Florida, and have 3 sons who have inspired her passion to make education freedom available to every family. As a future mother myself, I am inspired and encouraged by Erika's work. I not only find it empowering to learn from her, but I also think the work she is doing in the education sector of society is absolutely necessary for the future of our children. Would you all please join me in giving a warm welcome to Erika Donalds.
How exciting. Thank you, Riley, and thank you all for being here. Thanks for having me. What an incredible event that this is. I was sitting in the corner over here with my son, Mason, who's here with me, listening to some of the speakers earlier, and you guys are so blessed to have such inspirational role models in the young women of today and the people who are willing to come here and pour into your lives. I wish I had that when I was your age. You know, as was read in my bio, I've had a lot of titles in my life, and now my most important title is wife and mom to my 3 incredible boys, Damon, Darren, and Mason. My older 2, Damon just graduated from Holy Cross. He played football there. He's now living in New York and working in finance and enjoying life there. And my son, Darren, graduated from high school this year and is playing basketball at Truman State University in Missouri, where I just got to see him for the first time since we dropped him off over the last couple days. And I get to travel some with my son Mason, who's in 8th grade. But it was a journey to get here, to education expert, to working with America First Policy Institute, and working with the White House, and being on television, and traveling the country, getting to speak to amazing groups like this one. You know, I started out with a very chaotic childhood. My parents got divorced when I was 11, and it was a very difficult time for me in that I was very angry. I had no direction. I didn't have anyone really pouring into my life with a positive message. In fact, most of the messages that I was getting were very negative. And instead of having, like you do, role models who were, showing me the direction to go, I was turning to boys, wrong choices, wrong focus outside of school and work. You see, I got my first job at McDonald's when I was 14, not so that I could have some spending money, but so that I could help pay bills. I grew up in poverty. My parents didn't have much. My father was no longer around after my parents' divorce, and I was totally lost in the direction that I was going. I really didn't have a relationship with God to guide me. I didn't have the things that a young woman really needs to survive. And when I was in high school, I had so little direction. I skipped most of my classes in my sophomore year, but I did play high school basketball, and that helped to save my life. And that's why I'm so passionate about protecting women's sports, right? Absolutely, because if not for women's sports and the fact that I was ineligible to play basketball my junior year, that was the moment that really turned things around for me. And I thought, I don't want to be poor the rest of my life. I was living a very poverty-stricken life at the time. And I thought, I got to turn this around. First of all, I lost my passion, unable to play basketball my junior year. And then I was seeing on the horizon me living the same way that my mom did, struggling as a single mom, and I did not want that for my future. And so I did. I turned things around with my grades. It wasn't that I couldn't do it. I just didn't want to at the time. And so instead, I started getting good grades, got good test scores, and decided I was going to go to college. No one ever talked to me about going to college growing up. My dad had gone to college, but my mom didn't. And it just wasn't really a topic of conversation. And so I actually didn't get into Florida State University, but God had a different plan. It is where I wanted to go, so I took a trip to Tallahassee, which was not an easy trip, and I walked into the admissions office with my senior year grades in hand and my test scores, and this is in April. So if any of you have been to college, I think many of you are college age or in college now. April of my senior year, I did not have an acceptance to college, but I wanted to go. So I walk in there and say, look, I turned things around. I know I did poorly my sophomore and beginning of my junior year, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. That admissions officer took the folder away from me, got up and walked out of the room, came back in and handed me a letter. And it was an acceptance letter to Florida State University. Only God, right? Like, that doesn't happen. But he knew that I needed to be at Florida State so I could meet my husband there. Exactly. So in doing so, I did meet Byron there, but we were both lost at the time. And we found each other, we dated, we had a good time in college. I did well in college as an accounting major, but I chose accounting not because it was my passion, but because it was practical. Again, my only motivation was not to be poor, and frankly, not to have to depend on a man, because I saw how my mom struggled to depend on other people, including my dad, who really didn't come through for her at the time. And I didn't want to be dependent on anyone. But that's not a way to live. That's not a way to motivate. But that's why I majored in accounting, dated my husband at the time for about 3 years. And when we graduated, we had just started to kind of dabble in faith, is what I'll say. We started going to church in college. We knew we were missing something. September 11th happened when we were in our senior year, and that really rocked our world. I thought I was moving to New York. I was going to work on Wall Street, but there was no doing that after September 11th, and everyone who graduated with us really had a hard time finding jobs. The economy was bad. So we graduated together. We actually moved to Naples. I got pregnant. We got married, and we started to build a life together. When we got married, he was working at Cracker Barrel, and I had just started out an entry-level job, was working extra jobs on the weekends. He was moving furniture on the weekends, but we did have this seedling of faith, and we started getting involved in our church, and we started building on that. But I was still looking for validation everywhere else, including in my career. And as you heard, I was in financial services for 20 years, climbing the corporate ladder, working really hard, traveling a lot, focusing on that achievement. And I shattered the glass ceiling. I was the first woman to become a managing partner at my firm. At the end of my career there, after 20 years, I was not just the youngest partner, but the first woman managing director. I oversaw everything in Florida and New York for my company that was not the investments themselves: operations, HR, trading, compliance. On the outside, it looked like I had it all. By that time, I had 3 wonderful children, and my husband became very accomplished as well. And people would say to me, man, Erika, I don't know how you do it all. And I would smile, but I would think, I'm not. You see, during that time, I also decided to run for school board. Now, that did come from a place of where my priorities were. It came from because my own children, and especially my middle son, was really struggling in school. You see, like probably many of your parents, we purchased a home in the area where we wanted our kids to go to school. That's how middle-class families operate school choice. And this was an A school. This is what the state and the district told us. This is the best school in your district. This is where you want your children to go. And so I bought a house there and patted myself on the back, like, there we go. My job is done when it comes to my kids' education. Well, my first son went and did a great job and was fine. But when my second son went to the same school, he was absolutely miserable. From kindergarten, the first day, he hated going to school. And I felt like such a failure as a mom. Like, what's wrong? What am I doing wrong? I met with the teacher, I met with the principal, met with the counselors, and their conclusion was that he needed to be on medication. And that if I didn't put him on medication, they were gonna put him on a bus every day and send him across town to a special classroom. Well, that wasn't gonna happen. I knew that wasn't the answer. You know, your gut feeling, you gotta follow that as a woman, whether that's for yourself or eventually your own children. So I pulled him out immediately and I found a small classical private school to put him in. And from the first day that I picked him up from that school, because of course there's no more bus, so I have to rearrange my schedule and pick him up, he jumps in the car and he's like, "Mom, did you know about the Crusades?" And he talked to me the entire way home about what he had learned that day, and every day after that, he could not wait to tell us all that he had learned. And he didn't just tell us, he was telling our neighbors, his friends' parents, and they were all asking me, what about this classical education? So that led me to help start a charter school, a classical charter school in my community, where we opened with 400 students and another 400 students on a wait list. So I thought, wow, this is a bigger issue for parents than what I anticipated. I thought maybe it was just me, you know, my son's a little different, and that wasn't the case. So I ran for school board. I won against a longtime incumbent and sought to represent parents to the school system and make changes that are going to be more responsive to what parents desire for their kids. Well, I hit a brick wall when it came to serving on the school board. There was no changing the entrenched nature of this monopoly. Now, I learned the system serving on the board. I started working at the state level to help change education policy, really to loosen the system's grasp on our children. Because what I recognize is that when parents are in control of making these choices for their kids, they are far better at deciding what their children need in their education than this faraway bureaucrat, whether that bureaucrat was me on the school board or someone in Tallahassee at the state capitol, or worse, someone at the federal level. In the federal government in Washington, D.C., they certainly don't know anything about my child and what my child needs, or any parent in my district. And I got very passionate about policy, school choice policy especially, that will break the education monopoly and free parents to make decisions that they feel are best for their children. The people who know their children the most and love them, right? Know them most and love them most. They're the ones who should be making decisions for their kids. So that led, if you know about the state of Florida, we've done a lot of great things in school choice, and I'm proud to have been involved in a lot of that over the years, although that's been a 25-year effort ever since Jeb Bush was our governor. We've come a very long way with Governor DeSantis finally passing universal school choice in our state. But then we would get calls from other states, from Arizona, from now Mississippi, Texas, Tennessee, saying, hey, we want to do that as well. Who can help us put together these policies? And so I was able to start helping with that. But going back to the personal side of things, that was my passion. I found the thing that, man, when I got up in the morning, yes, I still had to go to my full-time job where I had a lot of responsibility as an executive. But I couldn't wait to get out of there so that I could work on the thing that really drove my passion, and that was this school choice and education reform. And I like to joke that my non-paying job got in the way of my paying job very quickly, and it became so overwhelming. I was doing way too much. And listen, ladies, when you do get married and you find the right man for you, listen to them when they tell you if you're doing too much or they advise you on the things that you're doing. You see, when I was serving on the school board, helping with education policy at the state level, and still in my executive position, I was neglecting the things that are most important. My husband, and of course, my children as well. And on the outside, I looked like the ultimate, boss lady. But on the inside, I knew I was not taking care of what God had assigned to me as the most important things in my life. And so I had to make some tough decisions. And through prayer and through tearful conversations, through the heartache that came from missing out on memories with my children, on family dinners, on helping with homework, there were just years, I'm not kidding, years, where I knew that I was not in the right place that God had me. And it took me way too long to figure it out. And even during that time, I was serving in church as well. I was doing devotions. But when I say I was doing devotions, I was reading devotions. And when you do your devotions, there's so many amazing devotions out there. I'm such a big devotion and self-help person. Christian self-help, not some of the weird new age stuff out there. Get Christian self-help books. It's important to read those things. It's important to read the word, but it's also important to get quiet with God. And after you've poured all of this great advice and scripture in, you have to just let him speak to you about what's specific to your situation. And when I finally got to doing that, because I was absolutely miserable, even though on the outside it looked like I was very successful, he said, it's time to leave your job. It's time to start your own thing. And even though I was an elected member of the school board and had a clear path to get reelected, you're not going to run again. Those were all really big changes, but I knew I had to make some bold decisions. And so I left my company. That was a really difficult choice because I had worked so hard to get there, and I was a managing partner, one of only 4, and actually 2 of us who were the next generation of leaders for this company. And that meant a very lucrative future for me as a woman and as an executive. That meant I could achieve my original goal, which was not to depend on anyone else for money. But God said, I have another plan. And I had to sell my shares, which meant I was giving up a lot of future income. And I had to say, you know what, I'm not going to run for school board again, which disappointed a lot of people. But it made my God happy. And being obedient to him gave me the peace that I was so desperate for throughout all that time. I went to my husband and said I was leaving my career. And he's like, are you sure? Yep, I feel like that's what God's telling me to do. He said, okay, I support you. I said, this is how much I have saved, and I'm going to take all of that, and I'm going to start a business, actually a nonprofit. You got to marry the right person, ladies, because I know he thought I was crazy at the time, but he went with it. And because of his own relationship with God, he trusted God with whatever was ahead for us. And so I did. I started a company. At first, it was just a nonprofit that started several charter schools in Florida, classical charter schools, like the one that I helped to start for my own children. I knew there were so many families out there that were desperate for this option. And we opened 5 schools in Florida. And then during COVID, of course, we had to start an online program. And we started the world's first virtual reality school called Optima Academy Online, which now is allowing thousands of kids to learn about ancient Rome in virtual reality, to go there and see the Colosseum for themselves, to go to the moon and learn about the lunar landing. Not only do we have students that are in the school, that are schooling at home and using our courses, but we're also in over 120 schools and districts that are getting a classical education with the most cutting-edge technology there is. And that's a for-profit business that I was able to start in addition to that first nonprofit that I started that now will be more lucrative long-term for my family and for my children, than anything I would have done in my original career. It's not something I could have ever imagined doing. Trust me, when I started my first school, and really all 5 of the brick and mortar schools I started, there was no technology at all in the classrooms. So for me to, because of COVID and this series of events, have a virtual reality school as well and company and be an education technology founder, only God could have planned that out. And only in my taking those steps and trusting him with my future would I realize this amazing dream that not only allows me to do the things that I'm passionate about, giving parents these great options, but now I get to work with President Trump, Linda McMahon, the White House and Congress to give school choice to many more families than I ever thought possible with our federal work and the new tax credit scholarship that we just passed. And I'm traveling state to state. I just testified in front of the Mississippi legislature to help them pass a school choice bill as well. We helped with Texas with the largest school choice expansion in the history of our country on day one, with Tennessee, and it grows and grows from there. And I say all that. The bottom line, though, is not about the fact that I get to do this and be on television, because it's what God has for me, for Erika Donalds. But for every single one of you, there is a dream out there and a future out there that will excite you as much as this excites me, that will help you get up in the morning and feel like I feel. I don't work. When I get up in the morning and I do the things that I do when I'm here or on TV or going to Washington, I'm doing the things that I would do if I just had the choice to do anything. And I get to do that with the balance of being there for my family as well. You see, being a wife and being a mom, those top priorities, they are not a pause from the purpose that God has for you. Right? As Reagan was saying, this Proverbs 31 woman that we all study, she was working and taking care of her family. She was industrious. She was profitable. But it wasn't doing that and then taking care of your family in separate phases of your life. No, God has a plan for all of that to work together in your life, whatever those things are. But when you keep first things first, the rest of the things that you do will be so much more fulfilling. And I am living proof of that. Titus 2, I love the verses that talk about the older woman teaching the younger woman how to love their husbands and their children, to take care of their homes, to live in purity, to do good. And that's why I'm here today. It's why I'm so passionate about talking to young women's groups like this one. Because you can do good while you are loving your husband and your children, and while you are living in purity, and the joy and peace that comes from having all of those pieces together in balance as you are led by God to do so. There is nothing that compares to that. And that's what I am praying for all of you, and I believe that God has for all of you. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Erika. I don't think it's a stretch to say that a lot of the women in this room want to be mothers someday, and you're such a role model for not only being a voice in the movement, but especially as a mother, so thank you for that. We have time for some questions now, so please, if you have any questions, line up with my friend by the door, and once you step up, please state your name and your school. Thank you.
Hi, Erika. Thank you so much for the great things you are doing for my home state, Florida. I'm a recent graduate from Florida Gulf Coast University, and I'm now with the Herzog Foundation. I wanted to ask you, what has been one of your favorite days in your career and why?
Awesome. At Florida Gulf Coast, I was on the board there for a little while, actually. Go Eagles. And one of the the thing that I'm most proud of, and the thing that caused me to switch careers, like ultimately, I get to talk to parents who have that same satisfaction that I had when I finally found the thing that was best for my child and made him thrive in his education. And as a parent, and if you're not a parent yet, you may not know, or maybe you've experienced it for yourself, when you find that fit that creates that spark and that love for learning in your child, there is no feeling like that. That's a success. And I was able to do that for my own child. And now I hear from parents all the time that are like, thank you so much for opening this school. My child is totally different now that they are learning in this way, whether that's in VR or because of a classical school, or maybe they're thanking me because of the policies that we helped pass where they could start their own school for their children or homeschool because they now have the resources. And that's what has been the factor that has helped their child be successful academically and to love learning. I mean, those are the rewards that's my why, right? That's why I get up and love to do this every day, because I know that it is changing not just kids' lives, because it changes the child's life, but it changes their family when that child is thriving and able to succeed. You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Grace Jenkins. I'm a student athlete at the University of Arizona. Growing up, I swam and played softball in Northern California and ultimately chose to play softball in college. You talked about protecting women's sports at the beginning of your speech. What do states like California need to do in order to protect young girls in sports, specifically with Title IX policy in education?
Congratulations on your great success. And this is a good question because it's so critical what we're doing right now and what the president and Linda McMahon are doing to protect women's sports in all of the states. If there are biological males playing in women's sports in your state, they are violating Title IX, and they are not entitled to federal funds, which will be a huge burden on them if those funds get pulled. There is a tip line that the Federal Department of Education has put out there so that you can report if this is happening, and they are holding these schools and these states accountable and threatening to withhold funds. And now the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi, our former Attorney General in Florida, is taking action and investigating these in order to fulfill the threat. It's not just a threat. Once the DOJ gets involved, if they find that they are violating the law, then that funding will be pulled. And so that's what's happening, I know, in California and many other states that are continuing down this path. The great news is that the population is with us. It is an 80-20 issue and growing. The support for keeping men out of women's sports and safe spaces is growing. And so they're going to lose, not just in the court of public opinion, but they're going to lose in court as well.
Hi, Erica. My name is Paige. I go to Arizona Christian University. As someone who has been abused by the education system by moving school multiple times, how would I, as a future mother, choose the right school for my child?
I just met with a young lady and talked to her about this. She has a son who's 6 and a son who's 4, and did just as I did, found an A school district, put their child in there, and is like, this is not the right thing. So I just went through with her, what do we do? Well, before your kids go to school, you need to go and visit the schools that you're considering. Go into these classrooms. If they don't let you physically go into a classroom in that school, mark it off the list. There is no reason why they should be proud for a parent to come in and see what they're doing in their classrooms. A lot of public schools do not let you visit classrooms. That is a huge red flag. So that's the first thing. But you should go in there and see, are they teaching my values? First of all, ask questions. Ask as many questions as are going to make you feel comfortable, and have those questions ready. What type of value system is this school teaching? And does it align with your values at home? That is really the number one thing that you should be considering when you're sending your child. Your child is going to be with those teachers and in that school sometimes more waking hours than they are with you. And so if that school doesn't align with your value system at home, that's number one. Are they transparent with their curriculum? Are you able to look and see everything that they're going to be using to teach your child? Because maybe you're not a teacher, you don't have the background, it doesn't matter. Are they being transparent so that you can see for yourself what is being used in that classroom? And of course, what is their academic performance? What are their results? How do they measure success? This is what I like to ask for school leaders, because they may measure success by people going to seminary, if that is their focus, as a religious school perhaps, or people going to Harvard. What's important to you as a parent and for your own children, and align those values and the things that you want for your children with the school that you're selecting for them, and go with your gut. I remember going to a daycare one time. Actually, I think it was for Mason. And I walked in the daycare and I wanted to shadow, and I sat in the room, and this was a daycare that had a long wait list and everybody wanted to get in there. And the whole time I was sitting there, I was uncomfortable. I was like, there was just something in my gut that said, I'm not sending my child here. And because I said no to that, even though I was at the top of the wait list and everybody wanted that spot, I found this, who we call Nonna, who took care of Mason when he was a baby, this wonderful Italian grandma that made him homemade pasta in her house every day and just had a few little babies that she was taking care of, and it was perfect for him. And so you just, as a mom, you will have that gut instinct that will lead you and guide you. And of course, prayer as well of, God, where do you want my children to go? Do you want me to homeschool? Homeschool, like Reagan said, I used to think it was the weirdest thing too, like bonnets and homemade clothing and whatnot. I'm just being honest, it was not a cool thing when I was growing up. Now, I encourage, if you have a heart to homeschool and you want to do it, there are so many resources out there, online courses and ways to have a modular experience where they can go and have homeschool extension and have social experiences and do things at home and travel with you. Like, embrace it if that's what God's calling you to do.
Hello, my name is Lucy Evich, and I was just wondering what the difference is between a charter school and a public school.
So charter schools actually technically are public schools. The difference, though, is that public schools, as you traditionally think of them, district-run schools, are run by the government. Magnet schools are also run by the government. The charter school is considered a public school, but it's run privately on a contract with the public school district. So the public school district is kind of outsourcing to this private entity, usually a nonprofit, that is running the school and gets to decide on its curriculum, gets to hire its teachers, and determine how that school is going to run and operate, but is still considered a public school. Now you have these school choice states where you might call them scholarship schools, kind of what a lot of people call them in Florida, where they exist and they're funded with public funding through the parents. The parents are getting an education scholarship account. They are directing those funds to a private school that has no contract with the government. It exists on its own, it qualifies for these funds, and parents are able to use public funds to pay tuition at these schools, but they are much more removed from the public and the government system than a charter school. So you've got your district, your government-run schools that are completely and totally run by the government. That includes magnet schools. You've got your charter schools that are privately run, but they are public schools. They're contracted with the government in order to run. And then you have your private schools where a lot of the school choice scholarships are being used. So it's public money, but they are, for the most part, able to run independently and are not under the public school rules.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, Erica. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. My name's Katie. I'm a former CBL intern and a recent graduate of Clemson University. I love the tidbit that you shared about your son and dealing with the counselors pushing medication, because I think our public school system isn't challenging our students enough, and a lot of kids are left bored, and people try to pinpoint it as several other things. So when we're thinking about curriculum reform and whatever work we are going to do within our public school system, what are the kind of topics or goals that we need to be really focused on in getting those into that classroom, so we don't have all these students, who are ending up bored and just, tired of going to school and kind of hating that experience?
It's a great question. I get asked this all the time because a lot of my friends, I was on the school board alongside the founders of Moms for Liberty, and they're encouraging a lot of people to run for school board because, 90% of our kids are still in public schools. So what do we do about that? Transparency is incredibly important in the public school system, not just for curriculum, but how are these students being guided through the system? how many students are being recommended to be put on medication and which schools are the biggest culprits. I think that would be incredibly important and illuminating for us to know, because I was just telling them in the back, I saw this mom's group post where this mom was describing her child's behavior and their issues in school, and it looked like exactly like what my kids are going through. And there were literally dozens of comments, and they were all like, oh, just put them on drugs, put them on drugs, put them on drugs, put them on medication. That's what I did. That's what they told me to do. And it worked just great. And we have to change that culture completely. And it's not going to come from the system. It's going to come from the accountability of other moms speaking to one another, saying, I pulled my child out. I never put him on medication, and they were just fine. Don't think that you have to listen to the experts. I don't have a lot of faith in the system. And I want to say, if you run for school board, you can make a difference. And I think that's really important work. And I wouldn't say don't run for school board or don't try to change the public system. But I will say, if that's what you're called to do, you should absolutely do it, and you should try to make as much change as you possibly can from that perch. I would not send my children to a public school. I know too much. I've seen too much. The system is so broken that it is very difficult for that to change in any reasonable amount of time. And our kids only get one kindergarten, they only get one first grade. And if they're in a school that doesn't serve them well and doesn't put them first and their needs and then the desires of their parents, they're not gonna have a great experience, they're gonna be set back. And so I hate to be that doom and gloom about our public school system, but it is incredibly broken and corrupt, for that matter. And the competition and the free market that school choice and education brings is the only thing, if anything, that is going to reform that system. That's why I'm so passionate about making sure every parent has multiple high-quality options to choose from. I just want to say one last thing. This organization is absolutely incredible. I've told them I want to get more involved. I hope all of you will get more involved, be an intern, have these speakers come to your campuses, stay connected with the women here. This is such an asset for you. I can't even tell you what dividends that this experience and these relationships will pay in your future. So absolutely stay involved, get as involved as you can. And thank you so much for all that you do here at the Luce Center. Thank you for having me.